little further, it said, and the king was exceedingly sorry, yet because of the oaths that he had made, so the king made an oath to Herodias' daughter, because of those oaths and because of the ones that sat with him, he did he didn't want to refuse her, and he did, and immediately the king sent an executioner and commanded the head of John the Baptist to be brought, and he went and beheaded him in prison, brought his head to on a platter, and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. And when the disciples heard of it, they came and took away the corpse and laid it in a tomb. Then the apostles gathered with Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, come aside by yourselves to a deserted place for a while. So this hit Jesus. This event hit Jesus, and he brought his disciples aside and rested for a while, and just really probably grieved during that time because John was so significant in his life. We know, Elizabeth, her womb leapt. The baby in the womb leapt whenever she saw Mary. So John and Jesus had a very strong connection from the start. So John's death probably rattled Christ a little. He went aside and dealt with all that. So death in somebody that we love, that can rattle us, and it can definitely bring us into a grieving time, and grief is needed. A lot of people don't want to grieve. They want to just push through it, and sometimes you've got so many situations occurring when someone dies that you do have to press through for several days to get things handled, because what is it, like 3 or 4 days now to have a funeral, to have sometimes one of our friends, they had to get the family members stuff out of their apartment or out of their home. So it's a most of the time it's a very rapid 3 or 4 or 5, even 10 days after someone dies. Now they do have a lot more memorial services, which is where people do like cremation, and they just have a memorial service several days later or months later even. But grief is needed, and grief is something that comes in different stages. A lot of grief classes teaches you that there's a rejection time, there's an anger time when you're angry with the person for leaving you. There's times whenever the just the memories just overshadow you, and you don't know how to. There's guilt. You feel guilt sometimes for being the one that survived, and all of those processed in the presence of the Lord. God will work you through those, and oftentimes I will very quickly, by the Lord's guidance, tell people, when they've had a very significant, maybe a spouse or a child, that, God doesn't want that person to die with the person who died. If you're still alive, there's a purpose for you on this earth. There's continuation of your life is needed, and God has another season for you without that person, and that's hard to come to, but it's also needed to have that person to come out of that grief, because man, it can rock your world so much, and especially if it's the person you drink coffee with every day or the person you were with every day. Grief is definitely there, and that void, the only one that can fill that void is Jesus, and he can begin to process